Ours is a user-friendly world, but with conditions. For people with disabilities, the 21st century world can be a forbidding place. In a moment, meet John Shepard, a Harvard-educated business consultant whose life changed suddenly and forever on an icy winter's night. Then Lorna asks Ontario's Lieutenant Governor David Onley, a man familiar with breaking barriers, about the barriers faced by millions every day. This is Context, a look at life beyond the headlines.
More than 4 million Canadians live each day with major disabilities, yet to many, their world remains a mystery. Our first guest was in a car accident that changed his life in an instant. John Shepard's spinal cord injury left him paralyzed, and here to help us understand life with disability, please welcome John Shepard. Thanks, John. Can you take me back to the night of the accident? You were driving home on a winter night. What happened?
Sure. I was in my last semester at Harvard Business School, and I was visiting my sister in Montreal. It was February 2003. I was driving back home to school on a Sunday evening, and the SUV that I'd rented hit a patch of black ice. I went off the road, the car rolled, the roof caved in, and crushed my head down into my spine. As a result, the seventh bone in my vertebra was broken. Otherwise, I was completely untouched. But that injury was sufficient to damage my spinal cord. And as a result, I've been living as a quadriplegic since then.
Boy, if you're going to break one bone in your body, it couldn't have been a worse one.
Indeed.
No blood, no other broken bones.
Not a scratch.
But tell us how you orientate to I am now. Like, did you realize right away that this is going to be permanent?
No, you know, it was a process. It wasn't something that happened in an instant, and it's something that's happening to this day. What happened was that my sense of who I was completely taken away. And I discovered how fully the person that I was in the world depended on my physical being. I, in an instant, lost my future, my career plans. Without knowing it, maybe the potential to have a family. And the sense of who I was in the world was gone in an instant. It's interesting, often people talk about experiences like sickness or disability, bringing them close to who they really are. I found that true, but I also found that it destroyed my sense of who I was. And it left me just living in the present moment, trying to cope.
Where did you begin again?
Learning how to get dressed, learning how to feed myself, learning how to get through the basics of a day. And to be honest, those are things that each day is still full of for me.
You have had to reorientate completely. What did you do with God in all of that? What a great disappointment.
Yeah. A disappointment, and I think something that has reshaped my understanding of God and my relationship to God, and what it means for God to have a plan for me.
You still feel His love?
I do.
Even though you're so disappointed?
Yeah, and those two things don't necessarily relate to each other. It's not that the faith I had in God was a faith that nothing bad was going to happen to me. I was aware that people were in car accidents before I got in one. So it's not so much the surprise that this has happened. It's been more that I've had to, in the loneliness that I've experienced, turn to God for a sense that I still have a purpose and a place in this world.
Well, you're here to teach us about inclusion. You have learned some tough lessons about the barriers people like me create to inclusion. What have you learned?
I've had a lot of difficulty with the way that I felt my interactions with others conditioned by stereotypes. So stereotypes about people with disabilities who are constantly in need, or stereotypes about people with disabilities who are heroes who conquer obstacles that others
Win
don't
Olympic
know
gold
about.
medals and...
Well, and they do.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing. And those stories are important and inspiring, but they're not the only reality for people with disabilities. And I think it's a problem and a shame if that's the only story that ever gets told about people who live with disabilities.
So we're going to talk this program about inclusion in employment. That ongoing struggle to just be a normal Canadian again is part of your passion.
Yes, absolutely.
You have got a great website that you're working on, SCUI University. Tell us about this.
So SCIU came out of my experience in spinal cord rehab, being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of things that I had to learn in the space of a very short number of months. As I said, I had to learn how to take care of myself, how to feed and clothe myself, but also how to reorient myself in the world, how to relate to other people, how to get around, how to think about my career, how to deal with relationships. And that was a devastating and overwhelming experience. What I hope to do with SCIU is make it possible, using technology, for people who have this kind of experience to adapt more easily.
Okay. John Shepherd, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, we'd like to now involve you with our home audience in this conversation and give you a chance to win a book that I'm going to take out. John, I've chosen It's Hard Not to Stare by our friend Tim Huff, and it's about just making a whole education about inclusion a lot earlier. So we've got at least 5 copies of these for you if you write in. But Sheldon, take it away from here.
Thank you so much, Lorna. We'd like to hear from all of you at home. Our question is this: how would you rank your community for accessibility to those with disabilities? Let's think of it as a report card, graded from A+ for excellent to F for fail. And please, let us know if your own story plays a part in shaping your view. As you can see, there are many ways to contact us, and you'll all get a chance, to win a copy of Lorna's book club selection, It's Hard Not to Stare: Helping Children Understand Disabilities by Tim Huff.
Okay, tapping the talents of people with disabilities. We'll get some vice-regal advice from the Lieutenant Governor next. Our next 2 guests understand firsthand the benefits of employing people with disabilities. Joining us are Ontario's Lieutenant Governor, the Honourable David Onley, and Mark Wafer, the owner of 7 Tim Hortons franchises. Welcome, gentlemen, to Context.
Thank you. Thank you.
Your Honor, after building a solid career as a journalist, you and an author, you made accessibility part of a key mandate for you as the Queen's representative. But I want to take you back down memory lane because you first met the Queen as a child with post-polio syndrome in this picture. This is front page of the Toronto Star. Times were so different in 1959. There you are in the front row, navy blazer, under a sign reading, "Crippled Children of Toronto."
Yes, welcome Her Majesty. That's what the sign says. And, I mean, just the terminology alone tells you how things have changed dramatically, because it's just terminology you just wouldn't use today.
Tell us more about the accessibility changes you have seen in us, in our attitudes.
It has been a slow process, and it's a process that is still a long way from being fully achieved. I really believe at this point that people with disabilities and Aboriginals are the 2 final remaining groups of our society yet to achieve full civil rights.
Wow. 800,000 Canadians with disabilities. And you don't feel we have full civil rights?
1.8 million in Ontario alone have disabilities. 800,000 of them are on government assistance. And of the government assistance, of that 795,000, about 340,000 on government assistance are recent college or university graduates who want to work and are able to work and have been trained to work, but are on government assistance, meaning they're surviving on taxpayers' dollars, which is something we agreed upon as a society, as a part of the social contract, if you will, decades ago, that we weren't going to allow people to just die in the street. We decided we would, give them benefits and assistance, and that's good for those who aren't able to work. But the vast majority of people with disabilities are able to work, but are on government assistance because employers simply aren't hiring them.
Well, Mark, this is a great segue for you because you are an employer. You're also an employer with a disability of your own. You own 7 Tim Hortons. How did you break through the barriers to being able to be a businessman with the disability that you have?
Well, personally, I didn't really have difficulty finding jobs. My difficulty was keeping jobs because with a hearing disability, I was able to hide it pretty good. And so I was able to get a job, and it would last a couple of weeks until the bosses found out that I was deaf, and then I would lose the job. So I went through a series of jobs as a teenager, many jobs where I would lose a job after a few weeks.
You both have taught us that people with disabilities face a higher unemployment rate. And there's many studies, including Rich Donovan's, he's a Canadian, you see him here on the screen, he's done the Return on Disability Profitability study. It shows that disabled employees actually increase profits. Mark, you own 7 Tim Hortons. You've hired nearly 100 employees with disabilities. Why are you convinced that's a good idea?
Well, you just have to look at the data, look at the numbers. I mean, when I look at my profit and loss every month, I can see that there's a difference from my profit and loss compared to employers who don't hire people with disabilities. If you look at turnover alone, the average turnover for a quick service restaurant in the GTA is about 95%. It's at least 75%, but somewhere between 75 and 95, depending on where it's located. And in my group of stores, it's 38%. And if you consider how much it costs to replace one person in a Tim Hortons, just a frontline worker, by the time you look at your advertising and training and uniforms and so on, then I clearly make more money. And really that's what we talk about. That's why we talk about the business case being so important.
And there are so many business cases that it surprised me. In researching this story, our producer came across this Walgreens warehouse built to accommodate a workforce where half of the 600 people are disabled. Your Honor, have you seen illustrations of where?
Well, I've been to that plant, and the remarkable thing about it is that it's not just that they have hired half of the employees who have disabilities, but it's the most productive and most profitable distribution center of all of their distribution centers in the United States. And so, it's another example, as is Mark's example, on a different scale, in a different industry, that demonstrates that hiring people with disabilities leads to greater profits. It's almost automatic. One of the things that Rich Donovan pointed out in his studies was creating a thing called the Return on Disability Index, of tracking 100 companies in the United States in a separate index based only on the ranking that they had as the highest per capita of disabled employees with their companies. So that was the only criterion on which they're selected. Didn't matter the industry, didn't matter the profession, didn't matter the state, just the companies that had the highest percentage of disabled employees. And that created the Return on Disability Index. And in 4 of the last 5 years, that index outperformed the New York Stock Exchange. Why? The answer is very simply, the increased number of people with disabilities increases productivity, as it does in Mark's stores, and as it does at Walgreens, and as it does in every other business that employs people with disabilities, because they have less absenteeism, higher job retention, and simply work harder. Okay. Because they know that they have fewer chances of ever getting another job.
Wow. So fear.
Fear is a large element.
That they will
Yeah.
they will keep that job. They will do everything they can. Mark, you've hired over 100 employees in the last years. Give us your advice. How does a workplace go about doing that?
There's a number of different ways. First of all, businesses just have to do it. They need to open their doors to people with disabilities. Right now, that's not happening. The unemployment rate for people with disabilities today, percentage-wise, is the same as it was 30, 40 years ago. There's a tremendous number of agencies out there that represent people with disabilities, and connecting with them is a great way of onboarding people with disabilities into your workforce. What I do in my business is I'm there to make money. I'm there to make sure that I have a healthy bottom line.
Yeah.
I have a big responsibility for my 250 employees to make sure that I have a payroll at the end of the month. So I'm not creating positions for charity. None of the positions I'm made were for charity. Everybody who worked for me with a disability had to bring something to the table. They have to do their job, and they have to do it as well as anybody else would. So that's first and foremost. But the message to businesses out there and Canadian corporations is that there's such a massive number of people with disabilities who are job ready. They have the skills, they have the education, they're just not getting the opportunity to get into the workforce because companies still believe in a whole series of myths and misperceptions about safety and about litigation and about, people with disabilities needing more supervision and more time off, doctor's appointments, and so forth. And it's all a myth. It's actually the opposite.
Wow. Okay. It has been a pleasure having both of you here. You have really challenged us. His Honour, David, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, thank you very much. And Mark Wafer of Tim Hortons, thank you so much. Okay, now it's time to hear from you at home. You could win a selection from Lorna's books, and today's title is It's Hard Not to Stare. It's a great kids' book about teaching inclusion with a foreword by His Honour, David Onley. Sheldon.
Thank you so much, Lorna. And whether or not you cope with a disability, we want to hear your answer to this question. What do you think is the biggest obstacle facing those with disabilities? It could be funding. It could be something as specific as public transit, or as broad as the way our cities are designed, or even the prevailing attitude. Share your thoughts with us. As you can see, there are plenty of ways to reach us. For 5 of you, we'll be awarding the Lorna's Books pick.
All right, coming up, if you've ever doubted that living with disabilities can be both uplifting and an act of faith, you'll want to meet our next guests. Stick around.
Life comes from the recognition that I can't do it on my own, that I need help, and I cry out for help. That's to say, we need a savior. But not a savior who's going to give me necessarily power, but who's going to reveal to me my real identity is not being a Canadian Catholic, but being just myself, and that I'm loved by God. So, what are the experiences that make us realize that we're not all powerful and that we're not God? So it's the experience of my poverty. Or it's like when Pauline was angry and she had to discover the magic words. I need your help. Then I need friendship. I need community. I need church. I need God. So it's the touching of our impuissance, our powerlessness. It's when we touch our powerlessness that I need your help. And then we discover that fragility, weakness is not an evil, but it can be and should become the place where I can meet people. The strength, the beauty of human beings is that we are capable of doing beautiful things, but we're also capable of realizing that we need help.
Okay, time for an insider's look now at the power of partnership and the potential of those living with disabilities. Michael Brunet grew up with a disability and now works 2 jobs. Janet Nolan is the Chief Executive Officer of Christian Horizons, the largest provider of services to adults with developmental disabilities in Ontario. Michael and Janet, welcome both to Context.
Thank you very much.
Michael, thank you for being here. And you were one of those guys who volunteered faithfully in places, but you had a goal of wanting a real job. How did you get one?
I had a job coach, and she helped me a lot with the get a job and stuff.
You work at Target.
Yes.
Yeah, tell us about what you like about your job.
I do carts.
Okay.
And then I do the help people to load them in the cars and stuff like that, and we do a lot of things.
They call you a brand manager.
Yes.
Like you make sure that Target brand, people feel good when they've been with you, Michael.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Janet, we heard earlier that hiring employees with disabilities makes good economic sense. But for your organization, there's a spiritual component to this. Tell us about this.
Thank you, Lorna. Christian Horizons believes that people with exceptional needs should belong to communities in which their God-given gifts are valued and respected. And, you know, work is certainly a part of that belonging, certainly church community, if people are interested, being a part of a community interest group, that sort of thing. But all of those things work together to create communities of belonging so that people like Michael are fully included in their world.
And what has this work taught you about God?
Wow, well, that's a big question. I've been working with Christian Horizons for 25 years, and you know, we believe at Christian Horizons that God creates all people in His image, and that people with disabilities are just like everybody else, and are valued in the eyes of God. And that drives everything that we do, that shapes how we design our programs, what we advocate for, how we help build bridges into communities so that people like Michael and many others get to experience full communities of belonging.
Okay, so Michael, you live in that reality, the Christian Horizons community around you, but Target, your employer, how does it feel now that you've got a job that you've always wanted?
I feel great.
You know, did you? By the way, I got to ask you. You picked out a shirt that matches our set better than I do. Did you get it at Target? Or maybe I shouldn't ask.
No.
Right. You also work for a catering job. What do you like about that?
Pretty good.
Yeah? You like your catering job, Janet? Christian Horizons is inspired. I love this story. You know, it's one family who just realized they're going to be on a journey with disability they didn't expect. The Reeses, and it's grown into this huge thing for Ontario. But it is inspired by the example of Jesus. Tell us about what the example of Jesus does for our attitude as we think about giving the world of inclusion.
Absolutely. And thanks for mentioning the Reeses. Certainly they were our founding fathers and mother. The Reese's son, Stephen, was born with disabilities just over 50 years ago. And both Adrian and Jim Reese felt a calling from God at the time to establish an organization based on the community of faith. So, you know, community living organizations were being started at that time as well. And the Reeses believed that there could be an organization that was not bound by geographical community, but more by who Jesus calls us to be in our world. And the story of Christian Horizons began. Next year, we're going to be celebrating our Jubilee year, and very excited to look back on the last 50 years, but also look forward to the next 50 years and think about, you know, the call for our ministry to break down barriers, to help build bridges, to be an excellent service provider, but also to push a little bit further. In May next month, we're actually holding a pastors' conference to help churches to become more inclusive, include people with disabilities, you know, it's similar to what Mark talked about earlier, to look at the reality of disability in a different way, not as people like Michael being recipients of charity or goodwill, but equally contributing members of church communities, of business communities, all sorts of different ways.
Okay, we're going to help people link onto that because there is wonderful partnerships that can be made in all kinds of different imaginative ways that you've done at Christian Horizons. Michael Brunet, since you began your job at Target, I understand you have never missed a day of work.
No.
Never been late?
No.
Never left early?
No.
Wow. It's a good thing you're wearing the context blue. It's great. And Janet Nolan with Christian Horizons. Thank you both very much for being here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
In a moment, we've mentioned that 4 million Canadians live with disabilities. But could that number be closer to 30 million? My thoughts on this when we return. More than 4 million Canadians live with disabilities, and for them, perhaps it feels like the remaining 30-some million in our country have a learning disability, as acceptance and understanding seem to come at a glacial pace. In the New Testament, word of Jesus spread rapidly when he healed the blind and lame. But that was only part of a much bigger story. Jesus taught us that we're all broken and that not one of us is perfect. That's the bad news. The good news is that he has come to make us right with God. And what did he teach people about disabilities? Love your neighbor as yourself seems a good place to start. Tell us your story. We'd like to hear your thoughts on today's topic. And when you do so, you could also win a copy of our friend Tim Huff's book, It's Hard Not to Stare, Helping Children Understand Disabilities. You can call us with your story and with a chance to win a book at 1-866-315-2080. And you can also click on our website. Just go to contactwithlorna.com and enter that there as well. So for all of us, we've learned a lot today, but thanks for watching. Join us next week as we explore life beyond the headlines.